Day number 5 in our feature week, and definitely my most favorite one. Today we're talking about the management updates I envision, and it's gonna be huge, so let's get into it. Alright guys, if you have not seen the first 4 episodes of today's feature week, I highly recommend to jump back to them now and watch all of them, because you will need this knowledge for today's management video. This is gonna be a little bit of a different one. This building over here actually is just like a little placeholder. This is the wonderful Moon Cafe by Liv. It's a wonderful building. I just wanted to plop it down one more time just because it's so beautiful, but it's nothing to do with my actual idea behind the management. We've already set a couple of things that we need to talk about, so let's zoom all the way to the very first one, because there is the first point I want to talk about with you, and this is that building over here. So in the episode number 1 we talked about delivery management, arrival management, and so on, and we also talked about food management or food production in the second episode with the habitat. So combine those two things and we come to my very first point, and that is just good management in a way. So how I envision this is pretty similar to Parkitect, to be honest, and if you have no idea how Parkitect works, it's pretty simple. You have a system of, there is a delivery of goods, you have to purchase certain goods, and then there are some haulers. This is actually a staff member that can haul goods from A to B, and you will need these haulers to bring goods to your various shops and so on, and this is basically exactly the idea I have for this game. Imagine we have a new staff type, which is a hauler, for example, or you can build certain backstage vehicle routes, whatever. This is also why we have some staff vehicles. You see, it's all tying into that one. It will be one entire new layer of the game, but why do I think it's so much of a good thing? So in Planet Zoo 1, we obviously have a certain good management. We do have goods. Well, actually, let me just quickly show to you. If you have for a habitat, for example, over here, you can then go to the animals and you can select which kind of food you want to give them. So if you go for the highest grade food, this is number 3. It's the most expensive, and specifically for carnivores, it can really become super expensive. So if we were to choose like our tiger, you can see the kind of the third one, just because it's one animal. If you've got more in here, actually it would become even more expensive. So I have had zoos that were going bankrupt because of that. However, the point is, none of these things are really fun to play with. It's like you click a 1, 2, or 3 grade and that's about it. You pay money for that. It's just like very invisible, very impersonal, and it doesn't really feel like there is an actual need. It's always there. It's always delivered in time. There is no way it can, crack under the pressure of not having a good route set or whatever. So imagine you have to build a proper delivery center, and you also have to upgrade the delivery center. The more animals you have, the more base you should have for the delivery, or the bigger base should become. So imagine at the beginning you may only have that little spot over here, then you have 1 garage, 2 garages, and then maybe that big one over here as an addition, or like, as we can build everything piece by piece, it will be more likely to just have that as a invisible update by upgrading the module or putting down more modules. Just like I envision that the module could simply be just like a garage gate or something like that, just as our cubes that we most likely have in the game. Now, this would obviously also open the door for a lot of things you can do. Imagine you need to put down a certain staff route to organize food delivery between your different kitchens. So if that's the case, this is where obviously our greenhouses come into play. These would be the option to have your own production in comparison to purchasing everything. I don't want to go too much into a personal meat production. I think this is not what you could, but I think it's a very good thing to just have the idea to have a good crop production, for example, to at least produce a huge amount of the food required yourself. Being self-sufficient, having solar modules or whatever to create the energy would make you self-sufficient from purchasing, and hence would increase your money flow quite a bit. So this would add a completely new layer of goods, and this would obviously not only tie into the food management, but also obviously for your shops, souvenir shops, and so on. They would also be staffed by the goods you need to purchase, and then you could put on top of that a wonderful new addition to the game I quickly want to talk about as a next point. And to be honest, we stay here because the next point is a rather short one, simply because it's invisible and I don't really know how to showcase this other than talking about this. It is some random events. I don't think why this haven't made a big comeback in games anyways. This has been one of the coolest thing in these old games, because these old games obviously didn't have a layer of showcasing everything. So what they did is they had a lot of random events, and also maybe a modern game that is a good example of that is the 2 Point games. They are really good at that. They have very random events of certain things happening, whether it's a certain outage or it is a certain specific kind of person coming to your whatever museum, hospital, or it's a disease that is spreading or whatnot, or a lowering of some costs or an increase of some costs. You get it. And why not having this? Because of the kind of delivery management that would be a huge part of the game now, this could then become way more significant. Imagine having storms and so on. Yes, that's the thing. But imagine also having a nearby, I don't know, let's say shopping mall opening that creates a lot of problems with the delivery management, because there is a lot of traffic jams coming on and you need to potentially relocate your delivery bay as a thing. Or you just have a slower delivery for the next month. Imagine that's the thing, like delivery company has some problems and you have to expect a slower delivery, hence you have to maybe go to another provider as well to just like diversify your deliveries and whatnot. So these things could become, it's obviously always like a fine margin between becoming micromanagement that is annoying, but I think it's really good to have occasional things like that to keep the game interesting over a longer period of time, so that the zoo overall becomes a fun thing to build with. Because at some point you obviously will have set up your delivery management quite nicely, hopefully you have, and then it would become more or less redundant for your zoo. You have set everything in and then, you know, but with these challenges, that would be quite of a nice thing. Or imagine getting some strikes in, you know, for example, that all of your haulers you pay too little, you know, come in with an event of striking for a week or so. I think these things would make sense to keep the game interesting, not just overdoing them, obviously, because that becomes quickly annoying, but I think random events would be a fun little addition to, you know, enrich the new feature of the delivery management quite a bit. We gotta talk also about the education part of things. Also, I've read some of your comments from the first episode, which I've rewatched before. Actually, I took a couple of things out of this video and refilmed then because of your feedback. And I have seen a couple of people talking about that they didn't want to go into full education centers maybe or whatnot. However, my idea was to have an education center as a central point, but the education center could very well be just that info kind of box over here, or a little info counter, just as a central point to go to. Because in my opinion, the entire education system has to be reworked. The way it is actually working right now is pretty weird. So if you go in here and you've got the guest educational coverage, we obviously have these things that usually create a bit of a area around them to create education. I get the idea, but it's just like at some point it just becomes spamming of items, which is not how you do that in a real zoo. And this is also not how you do that in a good game, in my opinion. It should be a offer that is actually enriched by everything you place in a good manner. So imagine you have an education center, or you can place down multiple education centers for your different broader areas of your park, and connected to this education center, you can have tours, you can have educators, you can have all these education points, but then it would spread out from that very education center. It would create an increase of education potential for the zoo overall. You know, it would raise the bar for education, so that not individually the people who just, yeah, I don't know, they just walk by a certain speaker and the others don't, simply because they have a different route, doesn't mean that they are lesser educated. You know what I mean? And this system of actively having to be in the reach of these things, it should be more likely that you have an education system that enriches the amount of education. And now that's the important point. Imagine you can put your research, which is already a part of the education system, how it works in Planet Zoo already. So the idea is good. You know, in Planet Zoo, the more you have research about your animals, here in the research animal factor, as you can see, most of the things in here are super researched. These animals are just not in the park, this is why. But these are obviously fully researched, so you have the highest effect for the education if you set this to the education board. So if you were to go here and you were to choose something about, I don't know, I'm these things, that doesn't care. But if you go and have an education about the bonobo, for example, you reach the max level. But imagine this is now not individual per piece, but per habitat. So the entire bonobo habitat is reaching a certain level of educational value, and this is then given to the people when they have reached this habitat, when they have visited the habitat. And as a bonus, you can offer backstage tours or tours that then actually would count as a bonus to the people who are taking the tour. This way, the whole education system would become way more meaningful, but also detached from the individual pieces, because honestly, I didn't really like the spamming of items. It just like, it felt so forced to me to just freaking fly these things in everywhere and just throw all these kind of things. I mean, you know, you've put this thing down, Conservation Education Board, with the same thing 20 times in your zoo just to reach a certain amount of education. It's kind of meaningless, because people would be just annoyed by seeing this thing over and over again. It would make so much more sense to have an education center which you can set a certain space for and certain area, and then in this area they can fill up this specific need for, let's say, climate change, and that's it. You don't need to spam this anywhere else in the zoo. So I would really love to see a freaking bigger impact of education as a system, because I feel like it's a very under-featured feature in this game, because it's just like it. Yeah, as I said, it just ended up being just a spamming of items to reach a certain level, and it didn't really, it didn't really allow to get up one specific habitat to a certain nice degree, and then the next habitat and the next habitat, and put some education centers down which are dedicated for a certain educational purpose, you know what I mean? And this is how real zoos do that all of the time. They have different type of education purposes in buildings. In one building you learn, let's, for example, if you have like a that's a pretty cool example. If you actually go to a zoo where there's like an aquatic house, some of the zoos have a full tour, like in the Burger Zoo, for example. You learn about the sea while you go deeper into the sea, and then you're basically at the ground of the sea, and you then go up again, and they teach you about all the different layers of the sea while you go through that aquatic house. So the whole aquatic house has the purpose of teaching you, educate you about, about the sea as a thing. And this would be how I hopefully see this system in place in Planet Zoo 2. Anyways, enough about that one. Let's go to the next actual management point. For that one, we need to go to the animals. But actually, don't let yourself be fooled by what is going on here in the background, because that's not really too important. I just want to showcase some animals, because where I want to go is to the animal trading, and I'm going to check out this thing. Now, in this game, we've got two different kind of currencies. We've got the conservation credits, and we have the normal cash. I would love to see a complete overhaul of the way how conservation credits work. Honestly, I love the introduction of those in Planet Zoo. I think it has been a brilliant idea to add up another layer of decisive currency to be able to purchase a certain animal. However, the way it is implemented in Planet Zoo 1 ended up being just the same as in all games. At a certain point, you had your conservation credit farms, you farmed the animals, and then you sold them, and at a certain point, you get it, you have got enough conservation credits, and you can basically purchase everything with the conservation credits as well. I would love to see this connected to the rating of your zoo. And by that, I mean the entire zoo, and not only making these conservation breeding farms and then selling the animals. I would love to see another layer of this. Yes, you can still build your farms and make sure that you sell as many animals as you can, because of, having enough credits to purchase a certain animal if you can. But there are animals on this planet that you cannot just simply get into your zoo. Just like the giant panda, for example. You have to earn it by fulfilling the requirements of your zoo, and only if the Chinese government is basically accepting that, you will be renting a panda to your zoo. That means you have to fulfill these requirements, and those requirements are not really that easy to match. I would love to see the system in this game, at least for the scenario, franchise mode, and challenge mode, because that way it is not all about the money anymore. And for every good management game, this must be that big bold target. You want to have a game where you cannot purchase everything with money, because whenever you have that system, and in that kind of thing, it doesn't matter which type of money it is, conservation credits or cash, it doesn't matter. If it is a have enough purchase everything situation, it's not fun. But if it's down to the requirements and to the way how you deal with animals, which we are going to talk about in the next point will actually be a second option to gather more conservation credits and conservation, let's say, prestige. Maybe it's a second level of prestige. So down here, we've got our zoo reputation. And we already have the conservation rating. Maybe the conservation rating is enlarged with a prestige rating that you can only have certain animals if you reach that. And you could, honestly, I would be fine if there are not enough kind of examples in the real world, like with the giant panda. And to be honest, I frankly don't know if there are more animals like that. At least if you, for example, go for an AZA friendly zoo or an AZA zoo, then you also have to fulfill these requirements, first of all. And you could pair these requirements not only with the space and the habitat you build, but also with the reputation of your zoo so far, you know. Imagine, and this is another thing, we do have the zoo inspector, which I love, and you get some fines, you get actually some issues, you get protesters in your zoo, but yet again, they don't matter if you have, honestly, enough money. You can purchase everything. This is where I would love to see a reputation level that if you got too many fines and too many issues and too many protesters, then at a certain point you cannot purchase any more animals because other zoos or other providers will simply not allow you to purchase them. And I would love the system to be in place with the conservation credits. That would help tremendously. By the way, if you're wondering why all these issues occur, this is a zoo where I have a ape house already as a build because I wanted to have the infrastructure already because we're just talking about these conservation credits. Yeah, that would be fun. Anyways, speaking of fun, let's go to the next point, which actually requires the ape house. So let's go over. So this is the old Krefeld Zoo ape house, the one that unfortunately burned down due to a New Year's Eve kind of problem that happened. And I rebuilt this just as a little, nice thing to, showcase a little bit of a connection to that. I mean, this house hasn't been the most animal friendly in the past, and they have built a completely new area for the animals now. And whether you like it or not, it definitely wasn't AZA conform, but the idea in here is if you have habitats like this that maybe do not fulfill the full requirement, there would be a fun system that actual zoos also have, and this is exchange habitats and also exchange habitats and animals on a regular basis. So what zoos do is they have pairs of animals that switch zoos every couple years to focus on a new environment, to not get drained in an environment that is maybe not suitable for them or just barely suitable for them. A constant animal exchange would also help with a bigger need to refurbish your habitats and repurpose your habitats. Again, as I said, it's all about making the long-term game and the game itself more interesting and more involved to play with. Now imagine you've spent a lot of time building this fantastic gorilla space over here, but then your zoo needs you to exchange these gorillas because after 3 years of time, you had them rented to you, and that was great because people came in to see the gorillas. They are a star animal. Your zoo, earned reputation for having taken good care of them. But after 3 years, the contract ended and you need to switch them out for maybe other animals or none, and you are left with this empty habitat over here. You now would need to be repurposing this very habitat. And honestly, I find this a pretty nice challenge. I find this a pretty nice layer to the game that we haven't had yet. Imagine in scenario mode, you take over a zoo that faces exactly this situation in various months' time. Imagine you come into a very well-running zoo, but let's say 50% of your animals are about to be exchanged soon. You don't know for what animals that's going to be exchanged. You don't know if all animals will be replaced, and you don't know which exact habitats these are. Imagine then you're facing with these things, and you need to hurry because the next habitat and the next habitat is coming. Obviously, you can pause the game, but you know what I mean. And so this constant animal exchange would also apply as a long-term initiative for the game to keep players engaged, to make sure that casual players also want to redesign their habitats more often than not. And I think this is also what could keep you a lot more entertained over the time. And it's basically a little bit like Jurassic World Evolution introduced that with some of the scenario modes that I frankly found very nice indeed, where you had some animals delivered in a given time. There was a timer going down in about, let's say 8 days. there are 2 new dinosaurs being delivered and you didn't know exactly which, and then 4 or 5 days prior you got the information which type of animal will be there, and then you need to prepare a habitat for them, which exactly is the case in here. So that could be the case with a new habitat or with the repurpose of an existing habitat. I'd be a fan of the system. It's what real zoos do. It wouldn't require a big overhaul of the game because it's necessary just using obviously the marketplace to exchange animals, and then, well, that's about it. Let's move on to the next point. The next point is kind of shit, to be honest. Well, literally. We are talking about poop and the kind of production value, the produce of our animals. We are talking about waste and, well, poop. It is what these animals obviously give you. You could use this obviously now, as with greenhouses, you could actually use this as fertilizer. But also, I wanted to quickly talk about the habitat cleaning in general. I would say this is one of the very few things that has not given me anything in the first game. We have this interesting little tool called the poover. I call it the poover. I'm not sure if that's the official name, but that just kind of weird vacuum cleaning like looking thing that is just like sucking in all these things. Funnily enough, this game has actual physics to these things, which is hilarious, but I don't really like the way how habitats are cleaned in this game. So yes, water and water areas will be cleaned by your pumps and filtrations. That is fine, and it should be kept this way. It's nice. However, the habitat itself is not really meaningful. And if we zoom all the way back to the first episode again, and you will see this is why it all ties down, we talked about actual growing weeds, you know, weeds that grow organically over time with obviously scaling and stuff, making hopefully a debut in the game that could help. But I would love to see cleaning being a bit of a bigger challenge. You would need to have more types of cleaning needed or necessary, and by growing weeds, obviously this becomes a part of it. You will need someone to go in and chop down the weeds or kind of, you know, mow the habitat. You could even go that far that you have got some kind of these automatic like robot mowers. Like I would be happy to see these things as well, to be honest. They would work super nicely in the zoo as well. The animals could get used to these things easily. Not all animals though, but most animals could. So you could use these things, or, and this is the more fun part about it, you need to build, and this is why we talked about these holding areas, just like we have some examples over here for the seals, but apparently you could build holding areas for all of your animals. If you were to go to realism or the challenge mode, you would need to make sure that you have, let's say, a little gate in between, and there has to be a mechanic to bring your animals over, whether it's by giving them some treats in one area, or by giving them food and water, or by just simply waiting until everyone is in a different area. However, this would help to give your staff access to one area to mow down all the weeds, to clean all the defecations of, or how's that called? The poop, basically, from your animals. That would make the challenge a bit bigger. And yes, I know you don't want to micromanage, so this has to be somehow automated. So you need to be able to set your habitat. Let's say there is a new cleaning tab in here where you set this to all, let's say, I don't know, if they go with the same Planet Coaster idea of full work days, you could say all 6 hours, you know, one side of your habitat is going to be cleaned, or every 4 hours, I don't know. And this could then work with the keepers and cleaning staff aligned. I would love to see this. I would really love to see this. I've got also one little Easter egg for that in here. There's one cool little blueprint I downloaded of this kind of cleaning card over here. I would love to see cleaning become a lot more meaningful anyways, and would be fun to see such a kind of cleaning card or other kind of type of staff vehicle that we have over here to help with these jobs. Obviously, you know, when you come with these things in here, they could also have something to mow a lot more easily. They could even use some of the vehicles, because in larger habitats that can become very nasty over time. So this is definitely something I would love to see, because it just makes so much sense to make this a bigger part of the game, because as you can see, these animals do poop quite often. They do, and I'm not even sure where my staff members all went and why they're so far away. I think there's like a staff room all the way back there. This is why they do. But it's a good showcase anyways, to showcase how much they're pooping over time. And apparently this would be a lovely way of doing this. Some people have also commented, this is why I'm also recording this take yet again. Some people have been recording this with some other animals who actually like to have their habitat habitats overgrown a little bit over time, like wolves, for example, or bears that used to having their preferred trail, which always is kind of clean because they walk there, and then the rest of the habitat becomes overgrown over time. But they really like that because they can hide in all the weeds and all the stuff, and that would be very fun. And these habitats would need to be cleaned or like mowed down just every few months, for example, which would add another realism aspect to the game, and frankly another aspect of variation to the game. So you will see what that staff member is about to do in a second. Hopefully they take out the poover and just kind of storm through here and everything is clean again. That just is too easy. And once you have the money, and we're back with the point again, once you have the money, you can literally do this all. But if you have the money but you don't have the infrastructure of a holding pen or so, this can become a little bit of a bigger issue, my friends, if you don't have a layout that supports you to clean the habitats. And then obviously you need to have a bigger punishment for non-clean habitats, such as you need to, for example, close down an entire area of your habitat because it's basically not usable anymore, which again would require a complete overhaul of the fences and overlapping fences, holding pens, and you get it, different types of gates that are required to make these things possible. So you see, everything ties into place here while we were talking so much about all these other features. But there's one more thing which is directly connected to what you've seen on screen over here. So let's talk about the last thing. So from poop to trash, we are talking about waste now. Basically, what I think we talked at the beginning of the episode, now it's a nice framing because that's now closing the circle, also very relevant. We are talking about waste. Same way as in Parkitect, you have the haulers, but you also have a waste management. That one, though, can also be done by pipes, you know, or underground stuff, where the waste is collected to a waste kind of not the delivery, is basically a point next to your park where it can be taken up and brought away by like some trucks or whatever. But yeah, I would love to see, basically, because we have so much poop and everything is going into that poover is not realistic. It either is the biggest negative kind of materia thing ever in the world, or it is just basically super unrealistic. However, imagine cutting down all the weeds and pooving in all the kind of poop thingies. This would then create an amount of waste connected to this very habitat. So you would need to place down also obviously some containers in here. That do we also have containers? Let's say, whoops, container. No, we don't. I thought we had, but I think they're called differently. I'm just going to steal one of those real quick to showcase what I was talking about. So let's quickly, conservation waste skip. Oh my god, yeah, the naming is different. But imagine having this one then as a connection, and the bigger your habitat is, the more you would need for those things. And how they would function, funnily enough, would be exactly like a facility from energy. So basically it would be, let's say you take this transformer, but that model is obviously not a transformer, but it is actually like one of these waste skids, and then you put this one down, and just as in the transformer having an amount of energy, well, this one obviously has just like in Planet Coaster 2, it has an amount of energy. In here it's like a radius in which it provides energy, but imagine this has an amount of energy from 100, let's say. These things over here would also have a capacity of something, and once they're full, they have to be emptied by either a hauler or either a staff member with a whatever cart they're using to bring this back to the bigger waste area of your park. But whatever, as I said earlier, some of that could also be used for your greenhouses as fertilizer. So that all can be automated. It doesn't need to be. You just have to set the routes once, and then that would work. So no micromanagement involved in that one, because I would find this super nasty. But this would also make your habitats more meaningful and would add a certain kind of layer of more interesting things that a habitat can provide. You know, there is a real connection of a certain thing connected to a habitat. So same as go with the foods that have to be brought here, it would then be something that comes out of the habitat as produce. But you get the idea. So let's go to a little conclusion, because obviously that was quite a lot to take in, and I want to bring this all together. Let's just meet in here in that wonderful center that Liv has created. I would love to talk about all these management. I was super excited for the episode because I thought I have found a very good balance, and I still think so. As you may have seen, I have not really gone into a lot of the money side of things or all of the stuff that we already have. I think there's a lot of things in this game which is already pretty cool, you know, setting all the values for entry, cash and prices, and also refunds, in my opinion, have been a good introduction and can still be, if they're dealt with fair, I'm all in for that, you know. We've got all the mechanics, like as I said, the inspector and so on, all fine. What I think the game always was lacking is a certain balance, and with all of the introductions, I really hope that we can rebalance the game. And what I mean by balance are two main things. The one imbalance that the game has, once you've got money, everything else does matter again. That is a huge imbalance to the rest of the game. Once you have overcome that one point, and you've seen the one zoo that gave me a bit of a struggle was that only carnivore, basically only cat zoo, which worked at the end of the day because of selling so many animals, but it was a huge overweight in food versus what you can get in, and then obviously a lot of people had all the refunds because of our animals not being treated too much because sold so often. So that was a real imbalance, but once I overcame a certain amount of money, I was able to purchase so many other things like food stalls, education boards, blah, 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 all the animals. And all of a sudden, we had a working system, breeding farms and so on, and we could get away with this. Now, I would love to be able, to not be able to ever get away with this if I don't focus on making a good running zoo. You should still be rewarded for building a great running zoo and making a ton of money. You will most likely find an exploit, fine. But for the majority of the game, I would love to be it long-term, very interesting and also variable. You know, it needs to be exciting over time. You should not be able to just buy every animal that you want to. You just need to fulfill certain things first of all, and not just a pure research, but also the way how you plan and build your zoo. Maybe you need to have a shelter first. Maybe you need to have an indoor area first. Maybe you need to showcase first of all that you can build for hot temperatures or low temperatures in temperate areas. These kind of things, with my idea of how the whole system of conservation credits would work, would obviously bring a nice layer to the game. The other thing is, and this is most often a result of the money fix all kind of issue, and this is the second layer of imbalance. I found this game becoming super boring after and super repetitive after a while once you got the hang of it. Like, don't get me wrong, I like all the different type of staff members, and you can micromanage till death if you want to build the perfect tours and the perfect education areas and whatnot. You can do that, but it's super irrelevant to the game at some point. If you focused on spamming down all the education stuff and so on, you don't need tours. You know what I mean? You need this balance of make things meaningful. That's my second big pillar, as I talked about. This is why I introduced all the kind of new delivery management, which includes the waste management, the habitat cleaning, the food management with the ability to produce your own foods, and having this system in place, giving you a whole new layer of zoo planning requirement, basically, that will keep you busy. And to tie both worlds together, this is where I think I found a good segue of that one column of make sure that this imbalance of money fixes it all, has a segue into the second column, making it not repetitive. This is where the constant, let's say, random events and the constant animal exchange comes into play. Because those two things can actually combat both things. I mean, if Frontier were to have a good system and it does somehow analyze if a player is going to earn too much money or a player is putting down too many repetitive habitats, it could combat either sides of things, you know. Too much money would make then a resulting more harder way to gain conservation credits, or let's say conservation reputation, make it harder. Or if someone is leaning too much into I just copy the same habitat design at 20 times and just making sure that this works, this would then increase the events of, you know, animal exchange and random events that would combat this side of things. This would be a perfect kind of glue in between of these two columns, making the game long-term super interesting and long-term also super fun to play with. And now, for me, the biggest advantage of that system is if you imagine this all in a creative mode, because as you know, I'm not a management player, mostly for these things, because it doesn't really feel like, I don't like these games that feel like grinding through them, you know? If you have the feeling that a game doesn't really force you to think twice about things, I really don't like them, because it's just like making sure you're doing exactly what the game wants you to do and then just sit down and wait for the time to happen. I hate that. So this is why I came up with these ideas, which would hopefully feel completely more dynamic. But as a creative player, all of these introductions to the game would also still feel meaningful to me, designing the perfect zoo. Now I would love to have that challenge to play franchise mode as a creative player, just like ZSH Plays, for example, has done quite a couple of times with, for example, San Bernardino Zoo. I love that series, but again, it's again a matter of money fixes it all. So yes, he had to account for the management, but let's be honest, at a certain point that is working and there's not really that big of a challenge in, so it's kind of funny for the first 2 episodes or so, but after that it just becomes a sandbox zoo in a way with money. It doesn't really matter much more. See what I mean? And this is why I would love to have this as a creative player. Give me also the creative freedom, maybe even of unlimited money, but still give me the hard challenge of creating a perfectly functioning zoo with not spamming like stuff zones and whatever and stuff buildings anywhere, but making me think about how I lay out my zoo. If I want to do a full carnivore zoo, I have to really think about how I get all that food, how I get it transported in time, how I clean all the habitats, how I make sure to have the holding pens for these animals to ensure that my keepers can give them all the food required. This is why we have the new food fences where they have to bring the food. See, this is all tying together and all making sense. In order to make these management changes happen, we had to talk about all the changes in the first 4 episodes of this feature week. And the more I think about it, the more happy and proud I am of what I came up with, and hopefully you guys can just see the vision in here too. If not, that's totally fine. Jump into the comments and tell me where you see some issues with that idea. And if you need some other management overhauls, let me know in the comments down below as well. Very curious to hear what you guys are thinking about this. But that shall be it for today's episode. There's one more episode tomorrow, which I excluded a little bit from the rest of the series because it's a bit more of a wildcard episode that does not necessarily it's A, not required for what I've been talking about for 5 days now, and B, would be the absolutely icing on the cake, but not quite like as needed, I guess, to make a perfect game out of it. However, this is me thanking you guys. If you made it through and have watched all episodes, and even all of them fully, thank you to the bottom of my heart. This has been quite a lot of work, to be honest, more work than I expected it to be. So in case you want to support the channel, as always, the easiest way to do so is subscribe to the channel and watch more. That's for free. But if you want to be a little bit of a supporter, you can even become a member starting from €1. And full transparency over here. You have a certain member area in my Discord, by the way. No one really uses that. I try to put more little sneak peeks in there, but as no one really uses it, it's kind of pointless. But to be completely honest, it's a support of the channel. I don't like giving you early episodes or whatnot. It's just not kind of my style. I don't want to hide stuff from everyone. But eventually you will get some more emojis in the future, which I'm working on. But that's about it, okay? So if you want to support me, that's fine, but don't expect me to do crazy things for this. This is also why the lowest tier is so low. And yeah, in any case, if you need a game or so, you can purchase that via my instant gaming link. And yeah, sorry for all that kind of advertisement at the end of each episode. That's kind of how you help me free myself from that nasty algorithm kind of stuff, and make me do this kind of stuff for you guys, because frankly that takes time and is an investment in you and in making these videos, and I really desperately want to keep on doing this, and hopefully you can hear from the delivery of my videos lately how much fun I have, how much I enjoy doing this stuff. And this is because I kind of try to loosen myself from all the stress that YouTube would give me if I kind of try to follow the rabbit into the rabbit hole, which I totally stopped doing now, and I do what I want to do and I love to do, and hopefully that carries through and you guys can see the value in it, and also see the value in that beautiful building that lives on. My god, that is so beautiful. It's it's so simple, but it's so good looking. Anyhow, guys, enough rambling at the end of today's episode. I hope you enjoyed this management overview. I certainly did enjoy that quite a lot, and I can't wait to talk to you tomorrow. Tomorrow it's going to be a bit more of a fun episode, talking about actual ideas I had, and well, let's talk about that tomorrow. But for now, thank you so much. Have a great day, and till tomorrow.